Can you hear me? Yeah, shut off, Ellen. I couldn't think of another morning show.
Like legit, really? Like a little country music here, you know?
Okay.
It's I don't know. I get this like new thing with like country music. You didn't listen
Do
to
you?
its entire life.
Nice.
That's just age, Billy. That's just
Okay.
age.
What's that? That's my
It's
stage?
age. It's age.
Oh, age. You know,
Yeah,
I couldn't
it's
even
age.
hear you. I'm deaf.
When you start embracing country music, it's a warning sign.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm digging it then.
Cool.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Hi, Dave.
Hi there, Kristen. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing good. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Awesome.
inviting me to be with you.
Thanks for coming. My goodness.
Yeah. What a neat opportunity.
Yes, we're excited.
So how many weeks have you been doing this with the team?
Since January. So next week's our last week. We'll be through the whole book.
Good for you. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
how many people have you had participating?
Ooh, Billy, what do you think? It fluctuates on the week. We do it twice a month. So we have anywhere between like 14 to, I don't know.
25. You've had as
Yeah,
many as
25,
25.
30. Yeah.
14 to 25. So
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, that is really a wonderful group of people that are serious about this, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the one thing about real estate investing, I mean, we'll talk about it a little later, but I mean, it's easy to have this, kind of surface level, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then to go do the work to learn how to do it
Right.
is really the key.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you've been doing. And thank you for bringing that wisdom to the team.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been great. We've been reading sections of the book. I'll give them pages to read. And then each week I'll interview somebody from one of our offices who is an investor. And we talk about
Wonderful.
what they invest in. Like Billy does a lot of condos where Steve Zabowski's does buildings,
Yes.
We've got someone that does flips. So, we have different people doing different things. So it's been really interesting. I mean, I've loved it. I hope you guys have
Well,
too.
I'm sure that you
Yeah.
have, and I'm sure everyone
Yeah.
has, because you have that kind of blend between what Gary and Jay and I wanted to bring to the table, which was the overview and all of the pieces, right? The systems that we had learned from the 100 plus, millionaire investors that we had interviewed and worked with and had masterminds with.
Yeah.
We wanted to kind of bring that overview, but I think when you then bring it down to your local market, to what people are really finding and doing, because real estate is still a local business, even from the point of view of investing, it's a local business. Your deals are local, the regulations are local, the market, your renter market is local. So you play the local game, unless you decide. It was interesting. I was on a financial independence seminar like I did for you guys a couple of months ago with an office in the Hudson Valley of New York. And one woman said, this has really been terrible for us, because when COVID hit and they said we couldn't evict people, our renters stopped paying rent.
Mhm.
They could have afforded to pay it. They just knew they wouldn't be kicked out. They didn't pay it.
Yep.
And so she said, oh my God, we've been a year with no revenue.
Mhm.
And there you go. That's it. So one of the interesting things about is be careful where you invest.
Yeah.
Is that market, does that market favor the landlord? Because so many markets in this day and age now favor the tenant.
That's Massachusetts. They favor the tenant.
They favor the tenant. So
Yeah.
they really don't appreciate the risk. And they also kind of think, it's like they think about business. When they think about business, they think about big corporations that have deep pockets and they can withstand everything. And they don't realize that the great part of the economy is entrepreneurs, local business owners. And they are much more playing it on the edge, right? They're taking risks, they're doing, and the same thing with landlords. yes, you have big apartment building landlords that are, you know, maybe big corporations even, and REITs and that sort of thing. But then really so much of the investor market are the people like we have in this room, the onesies and twosies, the ones that are just building it up.
Mhm.
And for them, they're taking a big risk.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome, yeah. So the last two chapters that we read before, today was Receive $1 million in seventh level.
Yes, because
So,
that's the high end. It's interesting. When we wrote the book, we were really wanting to focus on the low end, the 1 to 4 unit kind of investor, you know, residential. And as we got toward the end of it, Gary said, we want this book to be the guide for everybody.
yep,
So we really ought to describe what that high end looks like, where you start going for multi-unit properties and where you build a team. I mean, even a staff of
Mhm.
people to do it. And so, yeah, so those are the ones that you just read. Cool.
yeah, awesome. Well, it's 11:01, so we will get started because we want to appreciate everybody's time here. So I'd like to introduce Dave Jenks. I don't know where he is in your screen, but Dave, you'll
Hi,
find him.
everybody.
There he
Hi,
is.
good to be here. Thank you.
So as you know, we've been reading that MREI book, and Dave is one of the co-authors with Gary Keller and Jay Papazan. So Dave was nice enough to join us today as we're finishing the book and answer any questions that you have. So we're going to talk about the book, why he wrote it, why he got involved in it, what that process was like. And then we'll have some discussions on some of the key topics. And then, like I said, we'll open it up for questions. So any questions that you have, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, anywhere, anytime along the way, this is really meant to be that chance, to kind of ask whatever question that anybody has, because this, it's a complicated topic.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dave, would you mind introducing yourself? I mean, we know you're an expert in real estate investing. How long have you been with Keller Williams? Why did you come to Keller Williams? And, how did you get involved in writing the book with Jay and Gary?
Yeah, well, I've been in real estate over 30 years. I began in upstate New York interestingly, because I came from my work in the Dale Carnegie Institute as a sales trainer, and then also my advanced degrees in business management. So I really came in much more as an advisor, mentor, business manager, a consultant to the franchisees of Century 21. And then because of the need, and we were right at that point in the real estate market where interest rates were 12, 13, 15%, we had to really master creative financing and owner financing and buy downs, and I mean, a whole bunch of things that we had to master. And as I began to master that and began to teach it, I really became a real estate agent teacher, right? I mean, I became the director of training for that 3-state region. Then, because of my nature, I moved more into the executive leadership. I became a regional director for 3 states out of Rochester, New York. And then Century 21 moved me to Texas to head up a 7-state division out of Dallas. It was called the Century 21 South Central States. And so, but it was interesting because my love is for business. I really love people that are in business and entrepreneurs. And I think real estate sales is the most entrepreneurial business there is, right? We don't get paid until we get the job done, and only if we get the job done, and only to the degree, that we get the job done. And it's so competitive as a business, and we put it on the line every day. So I have incredible respect for people that are succeeding in the real estate industry, because we also know it goes by the 80-20 rule. Only 20% of people who get into real estate will be at all successful, and only 10% will do really well, and 5% will be like the people we're talking about, the people that are really into this and really treat it as a profession, and they're in it for the long term. And then we get to the end of wealth building. And so one of the things that happened for me when I was with Century 21, we were #1 in the world. But when I moved to Dallas, I watched this little company growing down in Austin, and they had just reinvented, from the traditional company they were to the company with open books and profit share and capped commissions. No one else had capped commissions at the time. Now everybody has them capped, but capped splits. And so I watched this little company and I said, this to me is the way I would design a real estate company, just like Gary Keller is. And because I always study my competition, just like I studied investing, just like everything. I would say that what I bring to the table always is I'm a curious researcher. I really love to get into the pragmatic depths of things. And then I'm a synthesizer. I know how to bring that complexity into a way that people can understand it, right? Which is why I'm a very effective teacher and have been a writer too, but I'm not so much a writer. In other words, I can write and I can put copy together, but I don't sit down and really want to be a writer. You know, it's an extension of being a teacher. Gary and I often said that to each other, you know, before Jay got involved. We'd say, yeah, we're just two guys who like to teach. That's what, and Gary has built his company on his wisdom and his teaching and that same ability. So he and I were really very, very much in sync. Well, anyway, I watched this company, and then 4 years later, I got a call from Mo Anderson, and she said, Dave, we'd love to have you on our team because we believe you know more about real estate franchising as a national system than anyone we know. And also, we love the way you teach with agents. So anyway, I got to do that. Gary Keller and I built Keller Williams University. And then how this is relevant is that, you know, Gary and I, as I said, we always have been teachers. So the first thing we did was build Keller Williams University and all the courses. And the first 6 courses were business courses, not sales courses, business courses for real estate agents, though not for our franchisees. We did that. That was a separate thing. But for our real estate agents to treat their independent contractor job more like a business. And then we did masterminds and we did all of that. And of course, as you know, that led to us making the decision in 2002 to write MREA, the first book, right? And we said we did one of 2 things. We wanted to give a gift to the real estate industry of really understanding how to take your career to the highest level through getting, as well as being, you know, leads and listings, getting leverage. And so we did that. And we're doing that in our mastermind. So we wanted to, 1, give a gift to the industry. And number 2, we wanted to make Keller Williams famous. And even though we didn't emphasize Keller Williams in the book, I think Keller Williams is only mentioned maybe twice in the back where we say where the authors are from. And then once when in the front end where Gary Keller is talking to real estate agents in his company. And then he mentions his company. Otherwise, we weren't doing it as a promotion. In fact, the 24 people we highlight in the back of MREA, only 3 of them were with Keller Williams. 3 of the 24. We wanted to go to the best agents. We didn't care who they were with. And we have quotes in there from agents with all different companies. Now, a whole bunch of them ultimately joined Keller Williams because that was one of our goals. It was a sub goal, right? And so we did that. And then I think we got into this idea of helping the agent make the most of their career, right? So we said, you know, here's how you can take it big, MREA, you know, and have leverage where you actually can be an owner of it and you're receiving passive income without working there every day, right? That was our model, the 7th level, you know, the model of the 7th level. Well, he said, well, what else? Well, Gary Keller is a master of wealth building. It's just his nature. It's why Keller Williams has created more millionaires than any other company in history, is because he really cares about people's financial independence. And he said, what's the next thing we could do? And we said, well, invest in real estate, because we were kind of followers of Robert Kiyosaki, you know, and his cash flow quadrant. And he said, you know, the 2 ways to build wealth are to own businesses or to make investments. And his view of the best investment, other than owning a business, was in real estate. So we said, well, we've mastered the turn your self-employed job into a business, MREA. Let's focus on MREI. Now, none of the 3 of us were really investors much. Gary, a little bit, me and Jay, not at all. But we're all 3 of us are students, and I'm a researcher. So I'm the one that did the interviews with the 100+ people. And then we held 2 mastermind sessions. We weren't doing regular masterminds for investors, but we held 2 special masterminds where we invited them and then brainstormed. And then by then we had some preliminary outlines of the book, I mean, of the elements of the book. And we got their input on all of those. And then out of that came then the writing. And then we sent out a preliminary manuscript, a draft, to all of them and got their feedback, and, you know, that crafted it. And I will tell you one other little secret, and I do a seminar called Managing the Time of Your Life, which is all about time management and getting the most out of your life. And one of the things that is just I didn't realize it until somebody asked me a question. They said, how did you and Gary particularly, and Jay was our editor on the first book. Later, we all three became full bore, you know, authors. We really collaborated wonderfully. And it was hard to tell who came up with what idea and who wrote what, right? It was just because we worked so well together. But at that beginning, they said, how did you and Gary write the best-selling book in the history of real estate, MREA, when you were building this company? You were small, you only had 4,000 or 5,000 agents. You were trying to get new people. You didn't have many staff, 20, 25 people in the entire headquarters, national office. And they said, how did you do it? And it was funny because my answer to that, which was kind of an automatic, I said, Tuesdays with Gary. And there was a book out at the time called Tuesdays with Maury, which was a bestseller. And so it kind of was a neat play on that, but it just occurred to me. And I said, because every Tuesday afternoon, we spent 3 hours from 1 to 4 on the book, and we couldn't do anything else. We time blocked it. And I said, there's the magic of time blocking. 3 hours a week, and 10 months later, you've written a bestseller. And I think it's good to remember, because say you want to be an investor. If you devoted 3 hours a week to nothing but either studying real estate investing, studying your local market, going and investigating properties, building your budget and your financing. And, if you just put that 3 hours a week, it's amazing the progress you'll make in 10 months to a year. It's just astounding, which I think is what you're doing, Kristen, with this book club, because it's just twice a month we get together. But the wisdom we gain in that, what it's been like 5 months, right, is astounding. So I think that's why we're so committed, Keller Williams is, I know Gary as I am, to the concept of time blocking. Makes a big difference. So anyway, that's how we wrote the second book, is that we just said it was our commitment to real estate agents. Now, as a result of that, Jay and I began to do a little bit of investing. He's done a lot more. I would tell you that I've been more of a business builder than a real estate investor. So I don't, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I got rid of all the properties I had. I only had 4. So I'm not I'm not one of the ones you're interviewing that's doing this. Right. So I'm a teacher, mentor, researcher, but in this realm of life, not a doer. So you'll get a lot more hands-on wisdom. But what I've often said to people, though, is that the one advantage of learning from Dave when I've coached them or mentored them is I don't have one game I've played. Right. I'm not teaching you my game. I'm teaching you the game, because I've studied the game from all different angles and seen people who, began with small things, or people who did, Section 8s, or people who did high-end condos because they were doing it for temporary housing for executives while their home was being built. And then that was, so they had in the Washington, D.C. area, I mean, they had very expensive properties. And because they were dealing with a really high-end clientele, but they had built this flow of potential clients from the real estate agents who were selling new homes. We'd say, she'd say, look, if you have somebody who's coming into a new home, but it's being built and they need a place to live for 4 or 5 or 6 months or whatever, look at what I've got. And, it's the kind of place they would want. So there's all different ways to play the market. And I think that's what's fun, to have studied the game, not just one way to do the game. Yeah. So that's how we got here. That's how we got here, and it's funny because I talk about business building. So in 2009, I left Keller Williams full-time, and I'm still dedicated to them, and my license is still there. But but I wanted to move more into the entrepreneurial realm. So I helped another national company, Master Networks, a business to business referral company. With its educational arm, I helped build Master Networks University. And then I helped the founder of that, Chaz Wilson, write his best-selling book, 5+1, The Entrepreneur's Formula for Success. So I kind of did a parallel thing for him, for Chaz and for that company as I did with Gary. And I have an interest in revenue with that company. You know, in other words, that's a nice source of passive income for me. Yeah.
Awesome. So there's a lot of similarities between the MRI.
I'm sorry, you're breaking. Maybe it's I'm listening.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's interesting. From loud and then out for some reason. I don't know why. Go ahead.
How about now? Is that any better?
No, it's breaking up. Isn't that weird?
Fantastic. Great.
That's okay. I don't know. Maybe it may be something about my connection. Maybe not.
No, Margaret's shaking her head too. She can't hear me. Can you guys hear me now? Is this better?
That was a little better, but not great.
Okay. All right.
That's better.
All right. So the MREA book and the MREI book are very similar. It's the same concept, the lead generation and everything.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they're very similar because of our thought pattern.
Yep.
See, our thought pattern is what is the fundamental basis for succeeding in that endeavor, whatever the endeavor is. We did the same thing. We did a thing called it. We never published it. What is called the Millionaire Real Estate Company Owner. So that's what we taught to Keller Williams franchisees, the people who own our offices, the Keller Williams offices, because we wanted them to be wealth builders and we wanted them to run great real estate brokerages, you know, and of course that's what's happened. I mean, that's why we're number one in the world. I mean, because we have great offices and of course that attracts great agents and we provide the values to them. But so we kind of, our thinking goes fundamentals. And that's why we love the magic of threes, you know, magic comes in threes. So it's leads, listings, and leverage. And now it's criteria, terms, and network. Because what we realized when we looked at investing is the very first thing you need to have is a clarity about what you're looking for. What do you want to invest in? What makes it a good investment? Where is it located? Why are you attracted to it? Why do you want to give energy to it? Is there a rental market for it? It's all that, you know, and we say that's number one. It's like lead generation is number one in real estate sales. Understanding your investment criteria is absolutely number one in being an investor, right? Being an intelligent, what we call, you know, due north investor, a true investor. You really understand what you're looking for and why. You're not just wanting to own something. You're not just taking a risk on it. You just know that you better know what you're looking for and where. So criteria. And then terms, because it's all the financial game. I mean, the reason we're investing in real estate is for money to work for us, you know, for money to make a return on itself to us. And so terms is, and knowing the terms, knowing the sources of capital that you have for lending, ultimately over time, maybe becoming a lender yourself. It's knowing the financial side, the way you want to buy it, the method, the terms. And then of course, the similar thing with leverage extended for the investor is that you are working through other people. You have your inner circle, maybe investor partners. I know a lot of agents, for example, that will start an LLC, a real estate investment LLC, and they'll invite their best clients to be part of that LLC. Because a lot of mistakes people make as a real estate agent working with, quote, investors is they work with real estate investors and you don't want to. As an agent, I just would put a warning out there, don't work with investors because they're in it for the money and they'll take you out in a heartbeat. They know all the techniques for getting your information, getting your leads, getting your work done and all that stuff. And then in the end, boom, they'll take you out. That's just what we've found. So The best investors to work with are the non-investors. You know, doctors, lawyers, superintendents, owners of businesses, entrepreneurs, people who want a return on their money, want more than they want a healthy return on their money, meaning over 10% and preferably up toward 20% annually on their money. But there's no way they can get that other than owning a business, which they typically already do, or owning or investing in real estate. So that's who your client is. You want them because they're real happy. They don't want to do the searching for the properties. They don't want to do the property management. They don't want to be, in any way babysitting the property, the investment. They just want somebody doing that for them. But they love the idea of getting 10, 15, 20% a year on their money. So I would say that that's your target for your clientele if you are going to serve investors. Now, the other thing I found is that's also a source of capital. In other words, you may be limited in how much money you can borrow, but you're not limited in how many people you can get. Well, there's a limit, in terms of numbers, in terms of, the regulations of investors, but for small groups, you can get your money from your investors and you can become the managing partner or general partner, and your compensation comes from what you've done to grow it. So anyway, I just, I say from a point of view, from one point of view, that's just a great way to work it. So anyway, there's the inner group that works with you, and then there's your advisors. That might be other agents that are finding you leads, and it might be your mortgage company or sources of financing and property management. And then of course the outer circle are the ones who are really helping you with your transactions, landscapers, property managers, and handymen, and all of those people who help you with it. So the point is that the third element of that, it's just like an extension of leverage. Now, at the beginning, this is true for agents too, your leverage may not be people that you formally hire full-time, like staff members. There'll be people you either pay on an ad hoc basis or on a per job basis, right? Or a virtual assistant or whatever, or somebody who does flyers for you, or somebody who works the database, that you do that with, part-time. Or you with part-time workers, and you put those together. Well, that's really more what it's like when you're an investor. Then ultimately, when you get, like you've read the last chapters at the high end, then you may have full-time staff who are working for you. Ultimately. So there is a parallel. There's a parallel. And again, at first it's the think it, buy it, earn, and then receive, right? And the high end is receive, where it really does become very passive, right? Where you're receiving the money, not so much for your work, but for what you've put in place.
Did you, when you were doing the interview, did you have the MREA book in mind when you did?
Boy, I'm sorry, Kristen. It just is breaking up, and I can't hear.
You can't hear me.
What's your microphone? What microphone are you using?
Well, I'll put this one in to see if this works. But is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually clear. we can actually hear your words. That's great.
My computer's so unstable. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. So did you have the MREA book in mind as far as there are parallels? So did you do that intentionally, or when you were doing your interviews, did you just find that it was the same?
No, I think.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. What we found probably was that we had a strategy for understanding anything in the world of business, right? And it all begins with how you think, and then it begins with how you take action, and then it's how you get results, and then it's how you run it at the high end where it's now passive income or independent, and so we kind of think of that way in virtually every business we would look at. We would say that's so. When we looked at real estate investing, we kind of had that same strategy in mind, which is what makes it so parallel. Now, what was interesting for us is a lot of the investors we worked with had already read MREA, even though they weren't agents. Some were agents, but they said, no, that's such a great guide on building a business. And I have followed that, and particularly the lead generation model for how I find properties. And so I would say that, so what happened was our strategy paralleled MREA. And then our experience in interviewing investors found that was the track. They were on that track, and the only thing we had to figure out was what made it unique to investing. That's why it's criteria, terms, and network, right? Not leads, listings, and leverage. I mean, there is a parallel between among the three, but not exactly. It's very specific to them. And then we really learned from them all of the different nature of the, buy and hold versus buy, improve, and sell, and the different strategies for how you do real estate investing. That's where they were more informative to us. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite section of the book?
Well, one of the things I want to, it's interesting in our books, there's each of the sections has kind of a different thing, but I would say it's always the front and the back end. I always love the way you get started and how you think, right? The how you think matters. And then I always like the high end because it tells you where you really want to take it, right? That idea of MREA, that I could actually use my image, my brand, my systems, my reputation, and I could build that big enough where I could get leverage and have other people doing the details and allow me to be more free to do the dollar productive activities, the $7 productive activities. And then ultimately I could replace myself and have someone manage it on a day-to-day basis. And as we say in the book, why wouldn't you believe you could do that? I mean, there are so many other businesses in the world where the owner isn't flipping the hamburgers, right? Where the owner isn't meeting with the clients. And why wouldn't that also be able to be true in real estate? So I like kind of the underpinning, the front end, and then the high end. And one of the things, if I can you allow me to share my screen?
Sure.
Make me a co-host or something like that.
Co-host.
Co-host, perfect.
There you go.
All right, great. I just want to kind of do a front end for what I have done on the building financial independence set, because I think this is where it begins. So much of starting a new venture or really building it is really getting your sense of, why am I doing it and what am I trying to achieve? So for me, the life journey is health, wealth, and happiness. So, those are three different things that we have to work on. And I think when it comes to understanding our financial independence, what we really need to understand is it is not going to happen by accident. We're not going to win the lottery. And if we do, that's probably a bad thing, because almost everyone gets destroyed financially who wins the lottery. That all the big issues in life are about building the right mental set and then knowing what the fundamental actions are and then taking those on a consistent basis. And what I learned from one of my mentors in the real estate business, Floyd Wickman, who founded Sweat Hogs, and he's still a great trainer. But he said this thing, and it's almost kind of a Zen thing. He said, it's what you do when you don't have to that will determine what you become when you can no longer help it. I love that. It's what you do when you don't have to. No one's telling you you've got to save money and then invest it in something. But it will determine what your life is like when you no longer can make money or earn more money or take a higher job or whatever it is. And the same thing is true in almost every aspect of real estate. You're not going to make a good listing presentation unless you practice it when no one's telling you you have to. Or your lead generation system isn't going to provide you with business if you're not doing intentional things to build that clientele, that database, and communicate with them on a regular basis. And of course, the same thing we know is true in health. If you're not taking care of your health, eating right, exercising, getting your rest, that, when you have diabetes or you have a heart attack or whatever, it's going to be too late. So it's what you do when you don't have to. And it's a good reminder for us because Stephen Covey calls this quadrant 2 focus. And I think that's where the highest achievers and the people who get the most out of life spend their time, is in quadrant 2. And this comes out of his book, First Things First. So he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the third habit is do first things first. And then he made another book out of that, which went into more detail on this whole idea of time management. And he said that there are 4 ways we use our time. And they hit the criteria of either urgent or not urgent, or important or not important. And then that determines, quadrant 1 is things that are urgent and important. Quadrant 2 is things that are important, but there's not a sense of urgency about them. You don't have to do them, and something bad will happen if you don't. And then quadrant 3 is this is where you kind of spin wheels, and it feels like you're busy. It's kind of the busy quadrant. They feel urgent, but in the end, if you look at it, maybe they're not important. And then of course there's the nothing quadrant, which is but people spend a lot of time there. It's not urgent, not important, so in a sense, I just kind of give them separate names. I say that which is urgent and important is putting out fires. You got to put them out. You've got to do it. And then a lot of action and no results, as I call it, spinning wheels. And then the not urgent and not important, killing time, right? There's a wonderful Clint Black song called Killing Time. This killing time is killing me. And then there's rubber on the road, and that's what he calls quadrant 2. That's where we're really making the progress that matters in our life. We're putting rubber on the road. We're making progress. And I think that we all know the urgency one: deadlines, emergencies, recovery from mistakes or whatever. We know we got to do them. And a lot of us, that's a high stress quadrant. And then a lot of us get in the busy social media stuff, email, paperwork, people interrupting us, and we buy into that. We let them interrupt us. And then there's the quadrant 4, the escapes, the addictions, the procrastination, putting things off, dropping out. And a lot of people in independent contractor based, where no one's controlling their time, they do what I call the 1-4 dance. It's crazy and chaos, and then it's collapse and escape, right? It's just crash, right? Stress, crash, stress, crash. But then the real quadrant, and this is the point I want to make about this, because I think it matters in our mindset, is the one where all the important things happen: planning, training, investing, getting things in order. And see, a lot of people say, well, you got to take vacations, you need a quadrant 4. And I said, no, if you plan a vacation, it's a quadrant 2, not a quadrant. If you plan to take a time off, if you say, I'm going to play golf every Friday afternoon, that's not quadrant 4, that's quadrant 2. You've decided to do it. It's good for your health or your interest or your joy or whatever it is. You've planned for it. But training is one. Training and planning, people put that off, and then they wing it, and they end up over in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 because they're winging it. And then investing, building financial independence really is a quadrant 2 activity. It's where you're doing things now that may not look like they're gaining a lot of return, particularly if you're in the learning phase. I'm studying this, I'm going to these book clubs that Kristen's doing, and these are really interesting, but I'm not doing anything. Well, yes, you are. You're getting your mindset right, you're planning, and you're taking those first steps. And then of course you start to save money. And then that becomes the other thing when you look at, and this is kind of a 1-page summary. I mean, the whole thing is mastering the first 156 pages of MRAI, because the rest is about real estate, but the first 156 is really about wealth building and gaining financial independence. I paid my grandchildren $500 a piece to read the first 156 pages. I mean, they had to do a book report, and it had to be good enough that they actually read it. And I knew that. And then I would reward them with the money. But I wanted them to get that education. And that was I think our intention as we began to write the book was to make the beginning of the book about how money works and how financial independence is gained, and how to play that game, and then then that automatically led in to real estate, right? And then the idea is what, remember, it's a bold thing. What you track improves. What you keep track of improves. And I love to tell the story of Mo Anderson, who, when she came with as CEO of Keller Williams, and Gary said to her, I want you tracking your net worth on a monthly basis. She said, well, Gary, it's negative. My husband and I lost a lot of money in the real estate and oil and savings and loan crash in the late 80s. She said, we're down about $900,000. He said, keep track of it. Just keep track of it. And I remember she started doing that. And one day she came to me and said, hey, I only owe 500,000. And then it was 100,000. And then we had a big celebration when it went to zero. When her net worth went to zero, we had a big celebration. That's how kind of like instructive it was. But now she's a multimillionaire. But the key was she was tracking it. So there's a real calculation in the book, I know you've been through it, on how to easily create that 1-page sheet of what you own minus what you owe, your net worth. But it's a big deal. And then because everything requires a plan, whether it's to succeed in real estate or whatever, you need to have a budget so you know where your money's going, and then a plan for that. And then I think the big kind of simple thing to understand is that, and this is Gary Keller's philosophy. He said, live on 70% of what you earn. That is, so after you take your expenses out, but before you pay taxes, that's your kind of net take-home pay, your net income in running your real estate business. Live on 70% of that, whatever it takes. I remember Gary Keller. I mean, here we were. The company was making, was starting to make money. It had for many years. The national company had lost money because Gary was building it. But Mo Anderson made him get a new car. She said, Dave, you can't be meeting people and driving your Ford Escort. And he was living in a very simple little house that he'd been in for 10, 15 years. And he was driving an old car because he was living on 70% of his income. And he said, but here's the rule that he says, and I love it. He said, if you will live on 70% of your income and then save and then ultimately invest the other 30%, there will come a time in your life when you'll have more passive income coming in than you ever made earning money. Interesting. And then I think you understand the difference between active and passive investing. Passive investing is putting your money in a mutual fund or in a bank or somewhere where somebody else uses your money. Even buying stocks is a passive investment, even though you may actively be picking your stocks. It's a little more active, but active is when you are controlling the money, and that's investing in businesses and real estate and lending, your own personal hard money lending. So you understand that difference, and then you let your money work for you. And then I would just say, just to kind of put a capper, is really remind yourself of what Robert Kiyosaki teaches us, that that you get income from whoops, hang on a sec. What did I do? I just messed up my own. Here we go. But it's a great reminder, and it's a great model to have in front of you. And that is that, money comes to you from 4 quadrants in your life. You can either work for somebody else, earned income, employment, or you are self-employed. But as Robert Kiyosaki said, in either of those cases, you have to show up. You get paid for your work and your time, so it's a job. Now, he said the real wealth building happens on the other side. Number one, owning businesses. And his definition of a business and owning a business is that you can leave it for 6 months and it will, when you come back after 6 months, it will be better or as good as when you left. So it's a business that can run itself. That's a pretty high standard. And then the other, he said, is investing, getting that money to work for you. And of course, that's why we wrote the book, Millionaire Real Estate Agent and Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And then one thing I do want to highlight for people is, hang on a sec, is becoming an agent who serves investors, maybe along with your others, because because, and I'll tell you a story about Jim Reitzel in just a second, because I think it's a great role model for us, and you might want to pay attention to him. It's Reitzel, Jim Reitzel, and he's a longtime Keller Williams agent and a franchise owner up in Ontario, Canada, up in the Ontario province of Canada. I'll tell you about him in a second. So anyway, so we just figured this. And then the final thing, and it's not about our discussion here, although I would put it in people's minds, and that is Keller Williams' profit share. And what Gary and I said, where does it sit in the quadrants? Well, we know it sits on the wealth building side, the BI, the passive income, because it's very passive. You don't have to do much. Are you making an investment by sponsoring people, or are you building a business? And I've done a model that shows it's like building a business. But the point of it is, what we both realized is that it's the most amazing form of passive income that's ever been invented by any company, Keller Williams profit share. So, you know, that's worth taking a look at. So let me just kind of conclude that. And hang on a second, let me just do the stop share. With this, the story of Jim Reitzel, you know, it's interesting. He, you know, after we wrote the book in 2005, he came to Family Reunion in 2007, did a seminar on how to run a MREI investor night. And he asked me to be part of it. And he just said in front of everyone, he said, what Dave and Gary and Jay wrote in that book has changed my life. He said, what we decided to do, my son and I, is run monthly investor seminars. And he said, the material is right there in the, you know, if you go to Keller Inc., right there is a PowerPoint presentation, you know, the handouts, the workbook, all that stuff already done that you can customize to yourself. And he said, we started running them. And he said, two things have happened. One is we've started to work with a lot of investors. So that has been a source of income that we didn't have before. And it's guided us to become investors too. But he said, the one that people probably don't understand is it's raised our residential average sale price. Because he said, we're still residential agents, but our clientele has now gone up to another level, because the kind of people who are coming to our investor seminar are people with a lot higher average price of their home than others. And so they've started to work with us, and our investors will use us when they're ready to sell their personal residence and move up. So he said, not only have we increased our revenue that we didn't have before from working with investors, but we have raised our the quality of our clientele. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Does anybody have any questions for Dave? This would be a great opportunity.
I do.
Don't be shy, people.
No, I'll step in. Hi, Dave.
Awesome.
This is Elaine.
Hi, who's this?
Hi, it's Elaine.
Elaine, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. So I have only been doing this for a year actually today. And I am finding, I'd love just some words of wisdom on how it's my first time being self-employed, and just, you know, attending these classes. I love it. I'm very much into wealth building, but, you know, you talk about that discipline and sort of how to, you know, you're only as good as what you really put into it. And what do you recommend for somebody who's newer to the business and is sort of struggling to find that perfect balance of putting the right amount of time into all of this, you know, the investment piece, the real estate piece?
Well, first of all, there is no perfect. So start there. Gary says there is no perfectly balanced life. He said all you have is a counterbalanced life. In other words, that there are certain times when something is going to take more energy and focus, and you need to give it that, right? So that's one. Just understand, don't be hard on yourself about it. Now, I would say it's interesting, when we were building Keller Williams University, and Gary and I built a thing called the 6 Personal Perspectives. And you may have been to that class, or I highly recommend that you go on KW Connect and get to it, because what we built was a model that said, here are the 6 ways that high achievers think differently from less high achieving people. And we came up with 6 different things. Well, as we were doing that, Gary said an interesting thing. He said, Dave, you know, I come from a long line of lethargic people. And I went, really? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, they just were not, they did not have a work ethic. They didn't do much. They just kind of got along minimally. And he said, so I knew in my life, I had to build in clear goal setting, written goals and plans. I need to set aside time to do my planning. And he said, I needed time blocking so that I made sure that I got things done. And he said, the final thing I needed was accountability. So he said, I have built this company on accountability. And here's what he says about that. It's having a coach. It's having a third-party consultant, because he said, what you want to do is find a credible consultant that has a great reputation, pay what they charge, do what they say. And he did that. I can tell you big decisions he made in the company because his consultant said to do it. And the reason I bring that up, Eleni, is that that's one of the hardest parts of being in a self-disciplined profession like real estate. It's so easy to fill your time with other things. And it's so easy to kind of slide off track. And usually the highest priority things are the most difficult ones, like lead generation, or finding investment properties or whatever. So I think the biggest thing is to clearly have your goals written down. Written goals are magical in allowing them to generate outcomes. Having a 135, you know, or a 411. Those are two documents in Keller Williams that really have become part of us as a company, because we know what they do for productivity and getting what you want. So a 135, I won't cover it now, but you may have gone to that training. If you have, I highly recommend it. And using a 411, which is what is your on-track focus tool for staying on your progress toward the goals you want, right? And that's another extension of what gets measured gets done, what you track improves. So if you're keeping track of how you're using your time and how many people you're adding to your database and how many mailers you're getting out and you know how many leads you're generating, and those numbers will all increase. But if you're not keeping track of them, they won't, right? You'll just kind of feel like you're spinning wheels. You know, you'll be down in that quadrant 3 area, busy, not a lot of progress, right? So it's easy to be busy in this business, not easy to make progress.
Mhm.
So I would say, and so in the summary of all of that for me, and we did it for each other, Gary, Jay, and I were each other's accountability partners, not just in writing the book. We would share with each other our 411, and part of our time, not every week, but once a month, we would review each other's 411 to see if we were on track to accomplishing what we want.
Thank you.
So that's what I would say are the techniques, the best techniques for getting what you want, which is always that kind of blend. I love Linda McKissick's view. She said, you have to be grateful for what you have while going after what you want, right?
Mhm.
So it's important to begin with gratitude and appreciation for what you have, and then have your goals for what more you want.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Thank you. It's interesting sometimes when you've been around the business as long as I have, I go, gee, that just sounds so simplistic. And what I found is that simple isn't easy, but simple is true, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that Gary and I would say to each other was that our job as trainers and teachers and the builders of Keller Williams is we do the hard analytic work so that we can then synthesize it and give it back to people in something that's understandable and doable, right? Because otherwise the complexity can be overwhelming. So I would say just kind of follow those fundamental things that we put in MREA and MREI. Yeah. Good. Anybody else? A thought or a question or a topic that you'd like us to dive into?
Yeah, Dave, hi, Brian McGreen.
Brian, how are you?
Good, good, good. I appreciate the words of wisdom there. And I've been in sales and marketing a long time, but getting into the real estate market. So one of the
Well,
things
good. Welcome
is
aboard.
that,
You're bringing skill with you. It's important to understand. And I really, people will say to me, well, Dave, you know, what makes you such a great trainer in real estate? And I said, well, it's because I learned sales, right? I learned how to do selling. I taught the Dale Carnegie sales course, and the fundamentals of a great sales presentation are the same no matter what the business is. It just varies by the product, right? Or the service.
Right.
So, Brian, you're bringing that skill to the table. Good.
yeah, thank you. And thanks for your information here. But so one of the things that I have struggled with is finding an accountability partner sounds easy, but it's really not, because people value their time also. So unless you can find somebody where you can help them and they conversely help you, that's hasn't been easy for me, right, to do. So do you have any input on finding a
Yeah.
person like that? You and
Well,
Gary did this, but I
We
mean,
did. Well, but you would say, well, you guys are at the highest level, but in the interim, each of us have had our own individual accountability partner. So there's two different kinds. One is it's a really experienced, good productivity coach. So Keller Williams has tons of them with maps, and offices will have productivity coaches and that. And if that's their work and they're serious about it, they can be good. They can be very good, because the thing to remember is this: an accountability coach is not a mentor. Don't mix them up, right? In other words, they're not a role model for you. You're not looking for someone. You can find tons of role models around real estate.
Right.
I mean, Keller Williams has them. They're on KW Connect. You can listen to them. I mean, we're a big company of sharing the wisdom of role models. So if you want to get somebody who's going to teach you about, doing the business, that's teaching. That's not accountability.
right,
Accountability, and accountability is not even coaching in the sense of knowing the answers. Accountability is a feedback system to keep you on track. And as Gary
Okay.
Keller said, and I want to be really clear about this, he said an accountability session, which you ought to have at least one a week if you're in a producing oriented business, should not last more than 10 or 15 minutes. It's a stand-up face-to-face meeting. You ask 5 questions. I'll tell you the questions in a second. The person who's being, quote, held accountable answers them, and then you move on. If you go longer than 10 minutes, you're into therapy.
right.
Or into training. You're into explaining why you didn't get it done, or what's getting in the way, or the struggle you're having, or whatever. And then, or it's, well, I really don't know how to do that. So now it's training. And there's nothing wrong with either. There's nothing wrong with therapy or training. It's just, remember, that's not accountability. An accountability session goes like this. What were you trying to do? That's the first question. What were you trying to do? That's your goal list. That's your 411. What were you trying to do? Okay, how did you do? That's your tracking system. I was going to make 40 calls. I made 30. Okay, that's the number. I was going to add 20 people to my database. I added 25. Wonderful, good. So what were you trying to do? How did you do? How do you feel about that? See, because we're all driven by emotion. Yep. So if you feel good, you'll do more of it. If you don't feel good, you'll change something, right? You'll do something different. So how do you feel about it? And the next question is, and what are you going to do now? In other words, what are your goals, both for your outcomes and your actions for the next period of time till our next accountability session? So what are you going to do now? And then the 5th one is, and what could get in the way? Because it's always good to understand that things can get in the way, and it's important to recognize. Sometimes we create the things that get in the way. Sometimes our family does, or circumstances. But the point is, it's just be sure that you're handling realistically what's going to come, right? So what are you trying to do? What were you trying to do? How did you do? How do you feel about that? What are you going to do now? What could get in your way? That's an accountability. It takes 10 minutes.
Agreed.
Because the key, you understand? So the key is your answers, Brian. The key is your answers. Now, if you're looking for mentors and guides, then it's a different game. And you want to say, okay, who is doing real estate the way I want to do it? And maybe it's
Yeah.
something in your, yeah.
Right. No, thank you, because that really helps me and hopefully other people really look at what an accountability partner is.
Yes.
It's not this chit chat. Hey, how you making out?
No,
Blah,
no,
blah,
no,
blah.
no. In fact,
That's
you ought to,
nonsense.
in fact,
Yeah.
you ought to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, when we get together, it's hi, how are you? Good to see you. Okay, your turn. You ask me the 5 questions. Okay, now my turn. I ask you the 5 questions.
Right.
Okay,
right.
now we're done. You want to have a cup of coffee? Fine, we can go chit chat. I mean, it's okay to do chit chat. Just don't pretend that that's accountability.
Right. That's easy to let that get in the way.
Well, no, it is. And
Take time.
people, we all are social people, and we all like to have positive relationships. And I know a lot of coaches say the hardest part of my work as a coach is holding someone accountable. The hardest
Yeah.
part for me is to be honest and straight with them in their face about what they're not doing, or what they aren't doing that they said they were going to do.
Right.
And it's not meant to be disciplinary. It's meant to keep you on track. But part of that, if you're a, you think, I always like to think that some of the best accountability people are great college basketball coaches, because they have to recruit talent. They only have a few people, but they have to get them to improve their skills and work better as a team. And they have to do both the encouragement and the correction, right?
Right.
When things aren't being done right, you need to correct it. So, I mean, someone who's your accountability coach needs to say, this is the 3rd week in a row, Brian, that, you said you were going to add 40 people to your database, and you haven't added like an average of 15. So do we need to change that goal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or do you need to step up and add that
Right.
many people, right? So that's the kind of, I mean, it's a little bit, we call it tough love. You're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caring, but it's still being a little bit tough. Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Good advice.
Awesome. We have a couple more minutes. Does anybody else have any questions for Dave?
Let me just say to all of you that one is, I very much honor Kristen for being willing to take on this responsibility and create this structure for all of you to benefit from it.
Mhm.
And Kristen, you probably are learning something yourself, right?
That's why I'm doing it.
Oh, that's right.
No offense, guys.
No, that's right. I love it. It's
That's
number 10.
good.
It's number 10 on Gary and I's learning list, right? The 10 ways you learn. It's one of the 6 personal perspectives, and the 10th one is teach it.
Mhm.
If you want to really learn it, teach it, and a lot of people step up and do that. They teach it, so they learn it. So thank you, Kristen, for doing that. But all of
Thank you.
who've been a part of this and dedicated this, it will make a big difference in the long run, because this
Right.
is what is laying down the foundation for you to be ready to move when you really are ready to move and start doing that investing. One of the things that's difficult, and that is kind of an extension of the quote, it's what you do when you don't have to that will determine what you become when you can no longer help it. It's what you do when you're not tied to immediate outcomes that will determine the long-term outcomes. Like Linda McKissick loves to say, you need to learn how to ask for business and not be attached to the answer, because you're going to get no's, a lot of no's, but you'll also get some yeses. And the game you're playing is to get to the yeses, and the only way you get to the yeses is through the no's. And I think a lot of things in real estate take a lot of work at the front end, learning financing, learning the market, learning the contracts and legal side of the business, building your lead generation system, knowing your database, getting your database going, building your 8x8, your 33 touch, all of these kind of marketing tools. And Keller Williams keeps trying to make it easier and easier with command and the command marketing segments and all that. But nobody can take away the doing the work, right? You have to do the work.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things in real estate and also in wealth building. The curve for gaining cash flow and passive income from real estate investing is a long, slow curve that then has a big steep back end. I always like to say it's like a 747 taking off on the runway, right? You just put all that, they put all that power on, and it starts to move, and then it gets a little momentum, but it's still on the runway, and it keeps going, again, just picks up its speed. And then when it gets lift, oh my God, it just goes almost straight up. Well, that's what you find out with a lot of real estate wealth building, I've looked at the curves of people's, what they were making and what it turned into. We even have some in the book as good models. Like if you did a real estate investment every 2 years for 10 years, and then one a year for the next 5, so you'd have 10 properties. And then what would that look like at the end of that 15 years? And then what would that look like even if you didn't add any more to it at the end of 20 years? Right? All of that's there because it's that front end time and being willing to put in that energy, knowing it's the right thing. That's why studying the book is good, because you say, okay, well, I know I'm doing the right things. I'm not getting the results yet, but I know I'm doing the right things. And that's important. And the other thing, the final thing I just want to leave is understand the power of this, even if the great things aren't happening. For example, here's the thing I love to see. If you buy a property for 20% down, so maybe you're going to live in it for a while and then you're going to rent it. I mean, you're going to keep it when you get your next home, which is, by the way, a great strategy. Buy, live, and keep all the places that you lived in as investment properties, as a great way to do it for lots of reasons. But one of the things that's interesting that a lot of people don't understand in the math, if you buy a property for 20% down and put it on a 15-year note, and during that 15 years, it doesn't appreciate $1, doesn't increase in value even $1. And number 2 is you don't get any positive cash flow. You break even. You break even on your cash flow. At the end of 15 years, your investment will have earned you 11% a year on that investment. You will make 11% a year on that money you invested. And where else can you go get 11%? And that's with no appreciation and no cash flow.
Yeah.
So that's why it's such a valuable place. Now, the other thing is, the final thought is we say, buy it right, pay it down, pay it off. So buy it right just means never overpay and be very careful what you buy. And we say you can't time the market, but you can be cautious of the market. So right now is not a great time to invest in real estate. It just isn't, because of how much it's accelerating and how much, now you still may be able to find a troubled property or someone who needs cash fast. And if you can buy it fast, you can still do it. So I'm not saying there's always investments in every market, but there are just fewer now. But also you're saving your money up for when this market slides over to a buyer's market and now you're in there. I mean, think of the people who had cash in 2009, 10, and 11. They're wealthy for what they want. Yeah.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for coming to.
Can I just ask one more? I just want to bring one more thing up, Dave. I'm Al Stiles.
Hi, Al.
How you doing? So you said something that I'd like you to just repeat to everybody, because I think this is huge. Okay. It's what you do that you don't have to. I want to make sure everybody gets that word for word.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good. I'll actually send that. I'll send that slide to Kristen. I'll send that slide to her, and I'll send that so that she can share it. But it's just so it's clear. It's what you do when you don't have to. Okay. So like no one's pressuring you to do it. So it's what you do when you don't have to that will determine what you become when you can no longer help it.
So I think that's quadrant 2 explained.
That's quadrant 2. Absolutely quadrant 2. That is like almost a philosophic definition of quadrant 2. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, what people, when you study that quadrant 2 idea, see, the thing is that the more you're in quadrant 2, and installing systems and a calendar is quadrant 2, because that allows things to not slide into quadrant 1. See, what makes things happen in quadrant 1 is when they become an emergency. Oh my God, we should have gotten that done. Oh, we needed to get that done yesterday. Now it's due today. How did we let that one slip through the cracks, right? That's what creates quadrant 1, the high stress thing. So if you're getting things done in a timely way and more ahead of time, and then then there's only a few things that slide into the stress category.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you, Al, for making us focus on that.
Welcome.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate your time. This was
Okay. Good luck, everybody.
Amazing. So thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank
You
you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.